Hey, everybody. So, today in class, we learned about something called narrative arc, which is also known as a plot diagram. And we used the Disney Pixar short Piper to learn about it. Now, narrative arc is something that you're going to need to know moving forward. Now, every single story that you read, every single movie that you watch, every single TV show, they all have what's called a narrative arc. And it is in 5 parts, every single arc. And if you don't know these terms yet, that's okay. But we're going to need to know it moving forward. So, the first thing that every story begins with is called, if you don't know this already, it's known as the exposition. And on your narrative arc paper, I would like you to copy this down. It's exposition. After exposition, it is the rising action. 2 words, rising action. I'm going to explain what this means in just a minute. After the rising action comes with what's called the climax. After climax, you have the falling action, and every story ends with a resolution. So, once again, on your paper, please make sure that you've copied down all 5 of these terms on slide number 1. And then join me over on slide number 2, and I want you to see this. So a narrative arc looks like an arc or a mountain. It starts down here, and then you see this long mountain up. Then there's obviously the top of the mountain, and then you see it goes down, but not as far. And then here's the ending over here. It's almost like an escalator from the first floor and then a little bit down to the second floor or something similar to that. It's a mountain. You should be on slide number 2. And down here at the beginning, I want you to once again copy down the term exposition. Now, the exposition introduces the characters, the setting, and the conflict. Please write this down. And remember, the characters are who's in the story. Is it a little bird? Is it a person? Is it Harry Potter? Doesn't matter. That's the character. Remember, the setting is where the story takes place, and the conflict is basically what those characters are trying to achieve. So if it's in an action Marvel movie, a conflict might be a literal fight scene, but a conflict could also be, hey, we have to go find the lost treasure. That's the conflict that the characters have to overcome. In a romance, that might be, falling in love by Christmas, whatever. That's the conflict. That's what the characters are trying to achieve. The majority of the story takes place, as you can see, on this long escalator right up. And this is what's known as the rising action. And the rising action is a series of escalating events. So in the past, you've heard from teachers, hey, tell me what happens in the story. What happens? And you'll say, well, first this happens, then this happens, and then that happens next. And those are all different events that occurred. And it could be a fight scene, like, oh, well, the characters met and then they fought, and then something else happened. Or, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. But whatever. You have your rising action, and that is a series of escalating events. At the very tip top of the mountain, that is what's known as the climax. And the climax is the turning point, or I put slash, the most exciting part of the story. And you will hear from teachers, even on tests, you might be asked, read this passage, what's the climax? And you're going to know that the climax is coming towards the end of the story. So the climax doesn't happen, right at the beginning. It's closer to the end. This is the turning point. This is the final battle. That's the climax. Now, a movie doesn't end immediately after a climax. There's a little bit left in the story, and that begins with what's called the falling action. This little down here is called the falling action. And that is when the tension decreases and we are now moving to conclusion. So tension decreases slash moving to conclusion. And finally, you have the resolution. And the resolution is wrapping up the story. This is basically where do the characters end up at the end. And you can see, based off of how our mountain looks, with the exposition down here and the resolution up here, notice that the characters don't end up in the same place. And that's generally because in stories, characters learn something. There's some sort of change that happens. And that's why, with this resolution, the characters are in a new place. So please make sure you have these 5 terms and definitions copied down. Now, in class, we watched Piper a second time. And the assignment in class was to place in order where each of these events occurred. So we knew, for instance, that the exposition in Piper was that the birds, which are sandpipers, are at the beach eating clams. The main character, Piper, is a baby, and Piper's mom will no longer deliver food. So Piper must get its own food. So we learn a lot right at the beginning of the story in about 15 seconds. We see that there's birds at the beach, so we know what our setting is right away. We learn that Piper is a baby bird, and we figure out that Piper's mom's like, hey, come get your own food. And Piper's hungry, so Piper's got to figure out how to eat on its own. We learn all of that in like 15 to 20 seconds. That's the beginning. Then in class, I gave everybody time to figure out the order in which the events occurred, starting with Piper leaves nest for the first time. And then Piper tries digging for clams for the first time. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you were absent, if you have not had the time to watch Piper, I don't want you to worry about it at this point. I just want you to submit your work, and I at least want to see that you have all of these definitions written down. So if you have the 5 terms written on slide number 1, and all 5 of these terms and additional 5 definitions written down on slide 2, I would like you to please submit your assignment and send me a message on Schoology. Thank you.